appreciate it. Appreciate it. What? You commit mass destruction and murder on a scale that's almost inconceivable, and you ask me to appreciate it just because you happen to have made a brilliant conceived toy out of mummified remains of planets? I'm Chris Spivey.
And I'm Eddy Webb.
And today on Journalist, we talk about the amazing, the spectacular, the could be made today with the same graphic, special effects, and script, The Pirate Planet from Doctor Who. Morning, everybody. As you always know, that my first objective always is to do something that Eddy doesn't expect. And I had up the quote so he could see it. And he didn't know how I was going to read it because I'd been reading things, pretty normal, pretty chill recently. And I didn't want to go full on Baker. So I went a mix of Baker and person that didn't have enough coffee or sleep to project that into it. I think I pulled it off.
So, peek behind the curtain. Because of a combination of my hearing loss and my sinus problems, I actually can't wear normal headphones. So I have bone conduction headphones, which I use when I record. And so when Chris was talking into the microphone there, I didn't get loud volume in my ears. I got a sudden buzzing vibration against my skull as I got this Tom Baker homage blasted into my brain in a very literal level. So
I decided not to go high level, but for intensity. So
certainly the intensity came across. I may have bruises. But I would like to start, if I may, with your assertion that this could be made today, because I find that very interesting.
Well, do you want to start there, or can I add in that this was written by a little-known author, Douglas Adams, because that is something I have to point out because Douglas Adams is a genius. All right, it could be made today. Yes, out of the sheer ridiculousness of this episode, and at the same time, the literal message about destroying planets for resources and minerals is still incredibly resonant today. I don't know if that was Douglas Adams' initial intent, but that comes through from it.
Maybe. I mean, now that you say that, I could see Tenet pulling off some of this stuff, right?
Yeah. And not that I'm saying that it would be Douglas Adams and Frank Herbert together trying to write sci-fi that talks about ecology, but I would not turn down that dynamic duo if they were resurrected to give it a shot. Fair
enough. Okay, yes. Thank you for allowing me to do that. But yes, we really should talk about the writer because you are correct. It's kind of a shock if you don't realize this going in who wrote this.
So would you like to go? I know that you probably have infinitely more insight into it than I do, as I am an off-the-cuff guy that could tell you random stuff that he wrote.
Fair enough. So Douglas Adams, I mean, is not overselling it to say he's probably one of the more influential modern comedic writers. But he certainly didn't start off that way. He's best known, obviously, for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, both the radio serials and later the novels, and then later the movie, which is a whole episode I think we could probably do if we wanted to, comparing the TV show to the movie. Yeah, there was a TV show of it as well.
As someone that generally loves Sam Rockwell, that was a horrible miscasting of Sam Rockwell, because I love Sam Rockwell, but
He was perfectly cast to be what British people think Americans are like. But no, Douglas Adams was very much a person who was shaped by his interests and not so much by things like deadlines. So,
or budgets.
Right. He would do things like, hey, there's these computer games are coming out and they want to do a computer game version of Hitchhiker's Galaxy. That would be great. I would like to write that. So I'll go ahead and just teach myself how to program in the informed programming language and try to create a video game and then spend about a year doing that before someone else has to kind of take over and help out with the finish of the programming of that. And also, amazingly, after this, next season he becomes a script editor for Doctor Who. And so if you've read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and you saw Arthur Dent makes a passing reference in the novel about being a frustrated BBC pub producer, it's kind of a self-insert, which I didn't realize for many, many years until I went back to start studying Doctor Who, is that it's kind of a sideways slap at his run at Doctor Who, because he was very, I don't want to say miscast, because there's some genuine brilliance that came from his contribution to Doctor Who, but also not. I mean, for every City of Death, there is Horns of the Nimon, you know?
I heard, though, he got along with Baker like a house on fire, though. Like,
yes, no, Baker loved him. So did Lalla Ward, honestly. They both spoke very glowingly, and part of it was because Douglas was a genuine genius, and particularly in terms of writing dialogue, which they both sparkle at writing clever banter and dialogue, and partially because Douglas is one of the many people who supported Tom Baker's push to add more comedy to the show.
Which is in where I become less and less of a fan of the Baker era. Like this, the episode I chose today is the peak amount of comedy I would want, and it is high comedy with a lot of darker elements associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
And later, it loses the darker elements and just becomes high comedy.
Well, it's funny because there's kind of it becomes very swingy, right? Like, so weird. This is season 4 of Baker's run, right? Yeah, because this is the Key to Time season, and then season 5 is when Romana regenerates. No, I got this wrong. This is
spoiler. She does regenerate next season.
Yeah, by the way. Well, anyway, regardless, there's this season which Douglas writes for, but you're right. It's kind of the peak era of a good balance between the darker and the comedy. It swings a little bit in both directions throughout the season, but it generally has a pretty good balance. And you're right. I think Pirate Planet is probably the better balance inside that serial. Next season, Douglas Adams script edits, and so the comedy gets more and more prevalent. And then the season after that, it's very, very dark, and they strip all the comedy out because that's John Nathan Turner's season as producer, and he's like, this is too funny. So you have this weird swing in both directions, and like the last season of Baker is a little too bleak. And there's no joy at all.
What do you mean, Tom Baker? Spoiler, if you haven't seen it in like 50 years, you should really ask yourself, why are you even listening to it at this point? Where Tom Baker falls from a water tower, splat, and that's how he regenerates. You think that is too dark?
It's oh god, it's such a
splat,
such a fuck you to Tom Baker. But I mean, we've talked about this, like, because I guess since we're here, Tom Baker's gonna run into the same problem that William Hartnell ran into, which is that he felt he was irreducible from the show, and the show needed to get rid of him to move on. We're not quite there yet in terms of what we're watching, but we're gonna jump it. We're not gonna. This is the last Baker episode. It's like, yeah, this is kind of where Baker's on his way out. So it's interesting to see that in the second half, because really the Tom Baker era falls in 2 rough halves. We're in the second half of that. They're very much apparent contrasts, and it's fascinating that both sides of it have some genuinely fantastic people working in front of and behind the camera on both sides, but it's tonally very different.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss about Dougie A before we
Dougie A?
Can I say that I'm probably the only person on the planet to ever have done that? I will take full credit for it right now.
There you go. Copyright, trademark. You mentioned earlier that you weren't sure if the ecological message was there, and I genuinely think it is, because later on in life, Douglas Adams did a TV show and a book, I believe, called Last Chance to See, which was about various species that are about to go extinct.
Okay.
So I genuinely believe that it probably very much was intended, the ecological message on this front. Although again, this is actually a really good example of when people talk about how Doctor Who wasn't political. It's like, no, it was. It's just that sometimes it was coached in such bizarre imagery that if you're not paying half attention to it, you might miss it because it's relatively on the face of it. I mean, the speech you read is if you take it out of context, it reads like an ecological screed. But if you're swamped by the sheer nonsense of this story, you might lose that it's a extremely thinly veiled ecological rant.
Yeah, it is. It is a horrible holocaust of like evilness that they're going out. They're perpetrating by destroying, obliterating planets of like billions of sentient beings for at least a century.
But
You
there's a
don't see
robot
them.
parrot, and that really distracts people.
You don't see them, but it is implied constantly. And that goes back to our discussion that we had, though, again, about how you can't necessarily, in at least modern day, have something that's implied. You need to like punch people in the face with it to get them to understand it.
Right. And actually, that's a good point. Is that one of the things I've always loved about Baker's run is that Baker brings the humor, but also a lot of the writers generally bring different levels of horror to it. It's one of the darker runs of Doctor Who. There's a little bit of it in Pertwee as well, but Pertwee is still very much in the action hero mold. A lot of Pertwee stuff gets really, really dark to the point where famously a politician tried to step in and get them to cut it back, and successfully got them to cut it back. It's one of the reasons why the transition happens to Graham Williams is the producer now, was because it was considered to be too dark for kids. And yet it's like okay, well, we'll we won't have Doctor Who drown on screen, and we won't have monsters. So instead, we'll just do a fun story about obliterating entire worlds. Or later on, we'll do an entire story about a spaceship that is literally fueled on blood. Those kinds of lighthearted kids stories.
Well, we haven't hit my favorite Time Lord enemy yet. The greatest of all Time Lord enemies, the vampires.
Yes,
I
yes.
fucking love it. If I was given my others to write a Doctor Who story, it would feature the Great Vampire and the vampire war that the Time Lords had with the vampires. Because that is like untapped gold.
So, a digression, because on this podcast that never happens, but there was a multi-platform event in 2020 called Time Lord Victorious, which was about let's take that real dark turn of David Tennant near the end of his tenure and just expand that out into some comics and novels and whatnot. And it was a multi-doctor crossover, although very few doctors are actually in it. It was just kind of like, because again, it was comics and novels and whatnot. They can write whatever. And so part of the premise is that the Ninth Doctor ends up having to work with the Great Vampires to stop this 10th Doctor going too far upfield. And
Do you mean the Valyard?
no, they walk up to that, but they don't actually cross that line, which frustrated me. But in the comic, it's just a panel, kind of a throwaway panel. He's like, okay, we're gonna get on our great ships, and then we're gonna fly to this part in the dark times, and they are literally just spaceships shaped like coffins. And I'm like, yes, that is the correct answer. That is exactly what you should do in this moment.
Oh God, I love it so much. If we ever get to do, it's not New Who because there is a New Who coming with the 15th Doctor. If we ever did Middle Who and we get to the 10th Doctor, you realize that my speech I'm going to give, at least one of them is going to be the Time Lord Victorious one. Like, that's going to be my quote.
Oh
I'm going
God.
to find a way, even if I don't like the episode, just so I can do that. And if we did the 11th Doctor, I would have to do the Pandorica opens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
Because it's brilliant. Doctor Who
but
has the best speeches.
it absolutely does. I mean, and that's one of the things that I love about, and honestly, Tom Baker really epitomized. All of the Doctors have great moments and speeches, but I mean, we saw in Genesis Daleks. I mean, Tom Baker has weaponized, speeches, right? And all of them are great because really at the end of the day, Doctor Who ultimately boils down to let's put an extremely charismatic actor in a room with a bunch of silly looking monsters and watch them talk for 20 minutes.
Yeah. That's when it's at its best.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about that in Star Trek too, right? Like when Star Trek and Babylon 5 are at its best, it's when people are standing on stages looking very intensely at green screens and giving amazing lines.
Because it's a show about, and I know that if I was a Time Lord, I'd find this offensive, but it's a show about people at the end of the day. And that is where the real drive and momentum comes from. You could watch that all day. You can't watch someone like having a big gun battle all day. It loses the intensity. It's like,
right. So,
diminishing returns.
Thank God there wasn't an entire Fifth Doctor series about running and shooting down Cybermen, because that would be silly.
You mean Sixth Doctor, right?
No,
like every episode, been like every episode of Sixth Doctor.
Well, right, okay, but Earthshock in particular.
Poor Adric. Because now, thank you for bringing it back to that. Because one of the things I want to point out is like the violence that is being fought against by some people, or at least the implied violence of the show that's not being appropriate for kids, definitely comes back in full force during the Sixth Doctor's run. Like that is when it gets outrageous, and that's one of the reasons the show is temporarily canceled.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's fascinating because from Pertwee to Baker, there's this frankly staggering 12-year run, but it's very much sets the mold for what people believe Doctor Who should be. And then naturally, it's like, we've done this for 12 years. We need to reinvent it. We need to go a different direction, which has no parallels at all for what's going on right now in Doctor Who. But unlike in modern day, where like I feel like it's going in very strong directions and people are rebelling against it, in this case, it tried some things that were just bad decisions in retrospect. So we're in a lot of ways we're looking at kind of this is the peak, really, in a lot of ways.
Now that you've mentioned that, I have to put you on the spot and I'll date us a little bit. At a time of recording, we have both seen Doctor Who Star Beast. Either we saw it before it came out, we saw it when it aired, or we saw it sometime afterwards. You're not really sure when, because who knows when we really record these episodes anymore.
Right.
But as we may cover it in a decade from now, Eddie, what's your hot take? Hot takes only.
I liked it. I think it was good, and I think people who are mad about it are mad for the wrong reasons.
My hot take, I concur. If you want us to cover it sooner than later, whenever you hear this, you should, I don't know, how do they contact us on social media now?
Well, I would suggest if people really want us to do a breakdown of the Star Beast, they should support your Patreon and convince you to do an episode on Patreon with your fat cash, because we did do the Power of the Doctor on there and people seem to like that one. So
you bring up a good point. That is me never knowing how to promote myself, and that's why you have friends that do it for you that are professionals.
Exactly.
All right. I guess now that we've plugged a little bit, we should probably talk about the show. Talk about the episode. The episode itself, though, I know a little bit of backstory about it because I was really curious about how Douglas Adams came to write for Doctor Who. And I think this is his only official time where he's listed as a writer throughout the show, because he was like the script editor and everything else later.
Right, and and BBC rules do not allow the script editor to write scripts, so therefore they were never credited on screen.
I think that is a horrible rule, but so this was the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was sort of in progress. If I remember right, the first iteration it was done. This is before it became. I think the radio serials had already come out. Is what it was.
They're very close. I think the first one is either being recorded or maybe just came out. Yeah.
And he sort of sent, that was sort of his audition for getting the job here. And then he wrote the script. I think it was even called the Pirate in the Perfect Planet.
Ooh.
And it went in, and it was disliked because it didn't take into account what a budget would have to be. And it was like massive and sprawling. The nurse was actually the master, which I think is like fucking fantastic. Like before there was missing everything else, there would have been the nurse who was the master.
That's amazing.
And the captain was another Time Lord, and it held like a whole lot of Time Lord stuff into it, and there are multiple paradoxes on this
Wow.
grandiose scale. And you can see remnants of that still left in this. But then I think it was Anthony Reed took it, chopped it down, and they made it into something that was filmable and on budget instead of something that was.
Yeah, famously, one of the Hitchhiker's novels, I think it was the third one, was actually a recycled Doctor Who script, which at one point in time, famously, infamously, involved a night shoot at Wembley Stadium where all of the seats were actually cats. So they literally would have millions of cats at Wembley Stadium shooting at night. And anyone who's worked on television immediately is probably feeling their butt clench at how expensive and difficult that would have been.
Love it. But can you imagine how different that would have made the Master's trajectory if the nurse had actually remained the Master?
No, yeah, that would have been amazing, honestly.
I
And
don't think
this was funny you mentioned that because, like, to the people who have been like, Doctor can't be a woman, blah, 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 Baker, around this point, if not soon after this, would have gone on record several times saying, why can't the Doctor be a woman?
Love it.
So,
and that's pretty much what my knowledge of the back history that I'm going to share. I've got some other tidbits, but they're not as, I think, as amazing as that one was.
that is amazing. I actually didn't know that one. That's awesome.
Do you have anything that you want to cover before we move into it proper? I'm going to say one more thing that's tangentially related in a second.
Oh, the other thing I was going to say is some people tell you that this is part of the key to time plot, that you have to know the plot before and afterwards. You don't.
Nope.
Yes, essentially there is a season-long arc, but it's not in anything resembling the way we vision season-long arcs now. It's just an excuse to go from one adventure to another, and it pays off very badly at the end of the season. With there are Santarans involved, and the best/worst TARDIS interior chase scene ever. So I mean, it's just an excuse to come here and point, stick at things, and play radiation sounds.
Now that you've added that, I have to add in, I guess, the extra bit is that the original script had the Doctor finding the key to time segment immediately upon exiting the TARDIS, and then hiding it so that Romana doesn't know, so that he can show Romana how dangerous their life is for the work, for the stuff they're doing.
I would have loved that, honestly, if him just going bloop, and then just larking around for 4 episodes.
But that was immediately cut out because, for one, it sort of undermines Romana, and because she has the literal tracker in her hand.
Mm-hmm.
Doctor, why is your pocket buzzing? I don't know.
Look over there.
So
diamonds.
That wouldn't have worked. I love the key to time bit. I do. I love the concept of it being like a serialized thing, and I love that it introduced Romana. We're in the crush corner now because a young Chris saw Romana and instantly had a crush on Romana and married Tam, who was awesome in the role.
Mm-hmm.
And she was only on the show for 1 season because originally she didn't want to accept the role because she'd seen how the other companions were treated. But they said, no, you're going to be a Time Lord too, so you'll be on par with the Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And so she came in, she did the role, and of course, if you watch all the Key to Time, you'll see that she kind of starts up in the middle a little bit and slowly goes back down to what other assistants do. Doctor, what are we supposed to do?
Right.
And there's a rumor started, I think, by J&T that she was pregnant and that's why she left the show. But in some of her memoirs and other stuff, it says that that's not what it all happened. It was because the role was too demeaning for her and she didn't want to stay with it.
Right.
And we keep poking the bear that is J&T, but I think next episode, Eddy's going to have to tell us the story of J&T.
I own his last recorded memoirs. He did the 2-disc set of his memoirs. So I have opinions about J&T and his propensity to rewrite history.
And I've started reading up on J&T, and so I know some of the stuff now about that he's done. Some of the comments from Nicola Bryant and some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
So when we hit the 5th Doctor, that's all Eddy.
Yeah, thanks.
Right there for you, buddy.
but you're right. Like I had in my memory, I've watched these not that recently, honestly, but in my memory, I had always remembered kind of Romana 1 as being kind of this ice queen and kind of stiff and aloof, and I'm like, no, she's super funny. And it's a shame that she was not allowed to showcase that as much in the scripts because, like, you see glimmers of it, especially in this episode, because Douglas Adams gave no fucks and was happy to give her, actual cool lines. And her dry humor plays off of Baker's bombast so well. Oh man, it's amazing.
And so it was hard to choose this episode between the three, like from the one before it, which is not a great episode, but it has a couple of my favorite lines, like lines I still say to the day. This wind is so cool, it cuts through me like a laser. I just love it. I don't know why. It stuck with me at 13, and I am now well past 13, and I still remember it, and I say it sometimes.
Yeah, 15,
but it
16.
Also has Romana getting to quit back. You can just call me Fred because the doctor said her name was too long. Or the Stones of Blood. It's a really, really great episode that actually has parallels back to Star Beast that I now wish we had chosen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, of putting the wig on, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But because we did Demons, I didn't want to do something else that was culty with Baker. And
yeah.
But I could keep rambling on and not getting to the episode proper. I wonder if I could banter for like another 3 minutes and see if we could hit 30 minutes where we actually talk about a synopsis itself at this point.
No, I'm gonna pull this podcast over and make you start with the first episode.
You know what I'm gonna do?
You're gonna pause for 3 minutes.
I'm gonna.
I can edit
David
that,
Lynch it. So draw everything out to be super slow and like the old man walking from like the bar to a stool that's like 5 feet away. It takes 8 minutes. That's how Lynch would film it. I could do that on the podcast, but it's not nearly as interesting.
You are my friend, and I love you, but you are no David Lynch. Go ahead.
You keep saying that, and I keep saying thank you because it's very true. So this is the format of these are actually a little bit different again now. We're almost more in a 4-episode breakdown structure is what we've moved into for at least this one, and I want to say some of the upcoming classic episodes. Unless, of course, we talk about Black Orchard. I think that's like a 43-minute episode that's only one.
No, because talking about Black Orchard is going to be like 10 minutes. Yep, that happened.
So I'm going to probably read a little bit of it, and then we're going to wing it by ear how we do.
Sounds good.
Part 1. We open on a mountain base as Mr. Fibley tells the captain they found a new source for the psyllium. The captain orders it to be mined immediately and then speaks to the people of the planet declaring a new golden age. Many people in the street celebrate. A different group dressed in yellow robes in a dank cave mentally watch a young man like Superman peering into Lois Lane's window from that Superman Returns movie. Pralix, the young man, is unhappy at the announcement. That's all I'm giving you. That's what I'm giving you.
Okay.
I'm leaving the juice. I put the orange on the table. I put a knife beside it, and I was like, you know what? Let's just pause. Let's lynch it a minute. Let's pull it back.
There's a lot of Doctor Who, right? And like, although I love it and I've watched a lot of it several times, I forget details of it constantly. But I will never, until I die, forget Mr. Fibuli's name.
I love it.
Because I always hear the pirate, Mr. Fibuli. To this day, I'll still do that. I love it.
And the cyborg captain, like that is one of the first things we get to see for this episode. And as I give these bits of my life that happens as I watch these, so Eddy would know that I've been super busy at work, and so last night is when I sat down to finally watch this episode. Like we dropped off the kid to go do her stuff for a couple hours. Jill was being nice enough to read over something that I have due to give me a second set of eyes on it, and I popped in the Pirate Planet. And she heard the music and she started like humming along with it subconsciously because that is how good the Doctor Who opening theme is. Even if you don't know the old show, it gets you.
Yeah, it does.
And then it popped up and she was like, what are you watching? And then like the captain came on and she's like, fuck, you're watching an old Doctor Who. She thought it might have been a new one with like a little different sound beat. No, because she saw the captain of that cybernetic arm and that weird little like metal mustache he has over his lip.
So to this day, I am convinced that the gag is that he was so badly damaged that his mustache needed to be replaced with a cybernetic implant.
And she laughed at a lot of the episode as we watched it, but to Douglas Adams' credit in the acting on screen, she couldn't stop watching it. So, regardless of laughing, it is addictive to people that don't even really know or watch classic Doctor Who.
Yeah, because like I mean, so you picked a chunk where the Doctor doesn't even show up yet, but like you're dragged into this, right? Because it's a slightly longer than usual lead in before the Doctor shows up, and there's a lot of ground to cover. And to be honest, it's just the captain and Mr. Fibberly explaining the plot to you, but you don't care because it is the perfect combination of entertaining banter, of the captain is the right level of hyperbolic compared to Mr. Fibberly's slightly more restrained performance, and just what the hell is that on the screen? Like him taking his cyber arm and punching into various consoles as he looks into them is like ridiculous and amazing. This is before Cyberpunk. So I mean, like that idea of a cyberjack just doesn't exist. And so like, no, we're just gonna have this huge hand, and he's just gonna stick it into various holes in the console. And why not? Why not?
I want you to know that someone is probably going to listen to this and take that snippet of what you just said.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be internet.
Without the word console at the end of it. That's
Right.
going to be like circulated everywhere. All right. Would you like to linger on this? We could talk about the yet unnamed people with psychic powers hanging out in the sewer.
Well, that will come later. Although now that you've told me about people snipping my stuff out of context, it reminds me of there's I listen to a Sonic podcast called Sonic the Comic, which is about the UK comic. Long story, but at one point in time, one of the hosts talks about how Knuckles and Sonic are fighting and how they're going at it, and the editor of the show just takes that clip of them going at it and puts porn music behind it. So yeah, that's my future right there. I can see it.
Yeah. In the TARDIS, Romana is reading through the instruction manual to how to properly fly the TARDIS. The fourth Doctor secures the first segment of the Key to Time. Romana and the Doctor have banter back and forth, and the tracer goes off, and it's going to lead them to the planet of Califrax. The Doctor attempts to dematerialize onto what he calls a boring planet, but instead, the TARDIS is rocked back and forth, and a strange noise occurs. And unbeknownst to both of them, it is damaging Xanax's engines as well. And Romana says, "Did you consider flipping the so-and-so and doing the whatcha-whatch?" And the Doctor says, "I haven't done that in centuries." And she says, "Can I get a shot?" And the Doctor says, "All right." And then he and K9 sit in the corner making fun of Romana and how this isn't going to work. And it lands perfectly smooth and gracefully. And the Doctor gets up and looks at the screen and says, "That's not Califrax."
Mm-hmm.
So, another script beat is originally this scene was added in by Douglas Adams to explain why Tom Baker's lip looks how it does.
Yep.
Because in real life, Tom Baker, I think, was bit by a dog.
Yep. I was about to say that's what happened. Yep. Get bit by a dog.
This is no fun if we both have this level of like totally random knowledge.
I know.
Then it becomes like, will I say it before Eddie says it? Is Eddie going to let me say it? Is Chris going to let me add in that tidbit before he adds it in? This is a scene that I still love to this day. I love all the interior TARDIS scenes between the Doctor and both Romanas. Because there's a level of camaraderie there that has not been present in previous companions. Because previous companions, it felt more like kind of like the Doctor and Ace, like a mentor and a student. This feels more like colleagues, although a junior colleague and a senior professor equivalent.
Yeah, the one thing this scene really helps to illustrate is the idea of someone who is extremely book smart versus someone who has lots of experience. And the one thing that, I mean, obviously the Doctor's going to be generally smarter than Romana because it's Doctor's name's in the title and hers isn't. but it doesn't shy away in general from allowing her to have moments like this. Like I love the TARDIS manual gag because it illustrates, like, frankly, two kinds of people. You know both of those people. You know the person who has to read the book and figure out how to play the game, and the kind of person who's like, let's just open the game and start moving pieces around and figure out the game as we play. You know,
Some people might say those two people are on this podcast right now.
Which one are you?
I think we'll let our audience guess.
Fair enough, because I'm totally the person who has to read the book first.
Look at you. Right there, you even gave away the gag again.
But, like, I mean, just little things like they have a pedestal and they have the manual, and Romana's flipping through it, and the Doctor just walks up and goes, "Oh, is that what it says?" And just rips the page and walks away. It's such a great visual gag.
And this also gives a chance for us to get a better. If you new to the show, it gives you a chance to fall in love with K9, who is right there the whole time too. And like the three of them and their banter is spot on. Even in the previous episode, you get more of a highlight of Romana being book smart and the Doctor not, when she even talks about how he failed out of like the academy or whatever it was 2 or 3 times. To pass on the next time with like a 51%, to show you the Doctor's not a book person. He is inherently great at these things, but not if it needs to be in a structured, organized way.
Right. And also this features one of my favorite K9 gags, which is that K9 knows what's going on in the plot and no one listens to him.
Oh, God. All right. Anything else on this before I really read a lot of the synopsis now?
Yeah, we need to get going on the plot. But you're right. I mean, this is one of those things where, frankly, the first episode is so fantastic, it is worth kind of lingering on it a bit.
Meanwhile, on the planet that's not Califrax, Pralix is now delirious, watched over by his grandfather Bellaton, sister Mula, and their friend Kimas, who should all have better names. Romana, K9, and the Doctor emerge onto a nearly deserted street until Romana meets a local who tells them that the people of this planet will be rich because of the captain and his generosity, and there's a new golden age of prosperity. He gives Romana some diamonds and rubies, saying they can be found everywhere. He warns her about the Menteads, and then leaves before elaborating. The Doctor finds precious stones scattered all over the street, including an extremely rare Ulion. Meanwhile, Bellatron is terrified that Pralix will be taken by the Menteads. Kimas is skeptical. Mula remembers her father's death at the hands of the captain's guards, obstinately saying that it is to save him from the Menteads. Meanwhile, the Menteads declare their harvest of Pralix is imminent as they begin to cross the fields of Xanax. The Doctor hears Pralix scream, and that's where we're stopping.
The scene of them trying to get people to talk to them is again one of my favorite scenes, right? Like, because it's the Doctor is always presented as just being intensely charismatic and able to have a conversation with anyone. So it's odd that he can't do that here, because these people are just so self-absorbed. They don't see need. And then Romana starts talking to them, and I just love the thing of like K9 explaining because she's prettier than you, and him, the offense on Tom Baker's face with the implication he is not as pretty as Romana, is amazing.
I could see it like that now that you say it. I didn't take it like that myself when I saw it. It is more of the thing that sort of the alien nature of Tom Baker that shows up in the City of Death. It's like, people consider that? Is she? Really? Sort of like all those processing of different levels. Because City of Death has one of my favorite scenes from Baker where like the Baron's wife, this beautiful woman, comes in he throws off the off comment, I assume you're a beautiful woman, something another, how other people would, but that is not something that registers for him.
Right. I mean, there's that too, don't get me wrong. There's also a bit of like, I didn't realize that, but also he's just, because what they've been establishing both in the serial and just throughout the season is that he has fallen into a competition with Romana that Romana does not entirely understand what is happening, nor that she should be competing with him. And so he starts putting stakes on the most ludicrous things, like losing a game of chess to K9, which is another season, but also things like now suddenly he's mad that he's not as pretty as Romana, which is not a debate that should be happening, but now that he knows there are stakes in this, he's now mad that he is in second place. And all that happens just mostly through like line delivery and facial expressions.
He was so good. And the joy, another sort of part of the scene that I love so much is that Romana offers the random person in the street jelly babies, and the doctor's like, "Where did you get those?" And she says, "The same place you do, your pocket," which shows she has pickpocketed him. And if you're not careful, you miss another gag associated with this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm gonna skip ahead a tangent for this, but the guard comes and they arrest her, and the guard takes a telescope.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she gets in the air car, she gives the guard back the telescope. So Romana is a fucking pickpocket amongst her many skills.
You're right. I actually have missed that. That is just amazing, and because she just does it so subtly, right? Like she just in that moment, you're like she just pulls out the bag and starts eating it, and then he notices like 3 or 4 seconds later. So she's not hiding it, but she's also not drawing attention to it. So it's just again, Mary Tam is fucking hysterical.
And even like the interaction between Romana and like the random person in the street is another info dump for you that sort of reinforces what you heard at the start of the episode. So like the beats of the episode are incredibly well paced. The sheer bombacity and silliness that is coming though around the corner is something that then throws you off about the actual horror that's going to be associated with what they're going to tell you.
Right, because at this point, it's basically just they've landed on the wrong planet, which again is also a weird meta gag because, like, for Doctor Who, landing on the wrong planet is not an uncommon occurrence. And so for the Doctor to be so offended about this, you start to wonder, is it because he's still mad that Romana's piloting the TARDIS better than him somehow? But really, all that's happened is they found some weird jewels in the ground, and there's something about a new age of prosperity and a pirate and a captain and Mentiads running around. But it's like it's just like you don't even understand what the stakes are. But again, you don't care at this point. You're just kind of dragged along by the sheer charisma and wordplay of this episode so far.
Anything else on this part before we move on?
Yep, let's go.
Because I'm probably going to go to the end of the episode now.
Okay.
And the doctor sets off to investigate where the screaming came from. He enters the home, asking questions and checking on Prelix. Romana waits behind, surveying the captain's fortress with a telescope, only to be arrested for that forbidden item. And the guard questions her. And she responds to the guard with a question of why, which is also illegal. She subtly sends K9 for the doctor to let him know what's happened. And as the guard takes her to the air car, she gives him back the telescope that he took from her and throws witty banter at him, giving him some sick burns. Mm-hmm. The captain sends more soldiers to stop the Mentiads, but their weapons are useless against their psychic powers. Instead, the captain sends troops to find the telepath and eliminate him before the Mentiads find him. The Mentiads burst in on the doctor in Prelix's home. Sorry, let me take a beat. I was so excited. I threw myself off. The guards burst into Prelix's home, and K9 stuns him, and the doctor asks for how long, and K9 says indefinitely, so that's not a stun. And the Mentiads enter the home and strike down the doctor with a blast of mental energy. Fade to black.
I'm glad you pointed out that K9 straight up murders people in this episode.
Yeah, if you're not listening, you miss it.
It's the tin dog. It's so cute. And it's like, no, K9's fucking ruthless.
Because it is so well done. K9, how long did you stun them? Indefinitely, master.
Right.
And if you're not paying attention, you're like, whoa, wait a second.
I mean, and the best part is the guy works on two levels, right? On the one hand, you can interpret it one way, obviously I do, which is like K9's kind of subtly implying I murdered them. Or you could take it extremely literally, which is also perfectly valid for K9, which is that I actually don't know, but I can't say that. So I'm going to say is the indefinite amount of time. I cannot define the amount of time. And again, it's funny, for like such a show with so much bombast in it, it's sometimes hard to see that there's actually a lot of subtle humor happening as well. And the guy who does the voice of K9 is really good because it sounds like he's doing everything in a monotone. But if you listen carefully, K9 actually has a strong emotional range. And you start to realize over time that K9 is not nearly as emotionless and fact driven as he likes to imply. So like K9 sulks, K9 lies, K9 has opinions and feelings, but it's all done in such a wonderfully underwritten, understated way. And the actor does a great job of just with his voice, like communicating so much with ridiculous lines like indefinitely, right?
Well, that's all. Well, of course, K9 does because K9 was created by humans, so
Right.
they had to give him that personality, and it was in there. I think this is K9 Mark II, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken.
Yes, because K9 Mark 1 was left behind for Sarah Jane? No. There are a few K9 options. No, K9 Mark 1 was left behind for Liv Leela. And then K9 Mark 2 was made
That's right.
before this. And then K9 Mark 2 was left behind for Sarah Jane. And then there was a K9 Mark 3, but we don't talk about that because it gets into weirdness.
You don't want to talk about how they got rid of Mark III in the most silly, obnoxious way possible?
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah. So, in case people are curious, I had actually originally chosen the Deadly Assassin as my episode, more behind the scenes stuff. But I could not, in good conscience, if this is the only Baker run we do, not talk about my favorite companion, Romana 1. Hands down. I love Ace, but Romana 1 is like my favorite companion, followed closely by Ace, then followed closely by Martha Jones.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is a lot that I went over. Is there anything in particular you would like to touch on before we move on? Because I know that we may be running a little long, but I don't want us to run too short by speeding up things because eventually it's going to become very, very short bits that we talk about going
That's
forward
true.
because there's a lot of cave shenanigans.
The only so one of the tropes that I don't generally like is what I call the kind of the stupid guard trope, which is extremely literal in this case. But generally, the idea is that the minions of the evil villain are so incompetent and are incompetent primarily because that's how the plot proceeds. It doesn't bother me in this show primarily because we've already established that their people are kind of been manipulated into following along with the captain, so it makes sense that they're not exactly mental giants. And B, we learn later, minor spoiler, that there is something involving mental energy with the people of this population. So actually, it gets explained, but mainly because the guards are so obviously the butt of the joke, and like it took me decades to kind of come to the realization of like, why are there even guards? Because what are they guarding? What are they guarding from? And it really just comes down to they're the captain's shock troops, right? And so they're not guards. They're just there to do whatever the captain says, and they literally have no other reason to do anything except for what the captain tells them to do. So they have zero initiative. So it actually works on a couple of levels. Like they don't know how to handle things that are outside of their extremely narrow range of experience. And we'll see this gag play to even better effect later, but just right now, Romana just so completely clowning this guy verbally. It's a great moment for Romana to show that she's just as good as the doctor at this stuff, but also him just kind of like, but no, what you can't have that, and just him being completely unable to keep up with it is wonderful.
But then you also get the scientist in her who breaks down how they could improve their air car and how she did it when she was 70, like a young 70.
Yes.
And that's a great reflection to show that also the technology on this planet is nowhere near what they are used to dealing with, which is going to be a great reflection for when they actually encounter the engines for the ship to go from like something super primitive that they did when they were kids to something else. So
Right.
all of that is like layered on. Like this is brilliant writing. I can't stress how well the writing is.
Yeah, I mean there's a tiny bit of a plot hole because he mentions that the telescope is forbidden, and you never really find out why explicitly. But what's left in the show, you can implicitly understand that the reason why is because they don't want you to pay too close attention to the stars because the stars change. That's it. That's all I had.
All right. The cliffhanger. I understand Doctor Who needs a cliffhanger. It's what it
It's the
does.
dumbest cliffhanger.
It is so bad. I've given a lot of compliments, but this cliffhanger is so bad. Tom Baker's acting in it is so bad. He's like, "Do I lay down now? No, not yet. Do I lay down now? Okay, I guess I should lay down." And
See, I love it, but I love it because for me, Doctor Who works best when you. I believe the Doctor is very, very, very slightly aware that he's in a television show. Not explicitly, he's not breaking the fourth wall, but he's aware of how these things need to play out. And so I have always read this scene as the Doctor going, "I should fall down because I'll make you feel good about yourself." Because you're clearly not up to my standards, but I should make them feel good about. I should make them feel welcome. So I should fall down now because this is about the time where something bad happens to me. Because spoiler for 10 seconds from now, but like he immediately shakes it off at the beginning of episode 2. It is explicitly here just because there needs to be a cliffhanger, and the show is not even hiding this fact in any way. The show's like, there's a cliffhanger here. Okay, we're done with that now. And that level of humor I find amazing. Because Douglas Adams is like, I genuinely don't know what to do here, so fuck it. I guess he falls down.
it is not even remotely on par with In the Daemons. John Pertwee gets hit with an ice blast and is like KO'd for about, what was it, 20 minutes of that episode.
Yeah.
Like that is impactful. That's a cliffhanger. This
Tom Baker's not even out until he's back before like the theme song fades out.
All right. When the Doctor immediately awakens, Prelix and the Mintiads are gone. K9 tells him that Romana was arrested, giving him an incentive to try to get to the bridge atop of the mountain. He flips a coin in the air with Mula to decide who they're going to go after first, Prelix or Romana. When it comes up heads how he wanted, Mula asks, "What? How did that happen?" And he shows her it's a two-headed coin, and Mula storms off to go save her brother, and the Doctor sends K9 after her to watch over her. While Kemus, her boyfriend, decides to let her go fuck off after the evil that they've been warned about for their entire lives, and accompanies the Doctor to the mountain, up to the bridge. After they trick a guard through the use of jelly babies. Anything for that?
Well, I mean, one is Prelix is the worst boyfriend ever, but
Kemus.
The jelly.
Hey, it's. I have to do this. It's Kemus because if it was Prelix, it would be a Luke and Leia story. Oh, bird! Star Wars.
Fair enough. You're right. I'm sorry. This is one of the areas where, like, you're right. The names are all kind of made up sounding, and I have trouble keeping them together.
I only know because I literally wrote this morning.
That, and also, frankly, if it's not being screamed, if your name's not being screamed by the captain, I don't know who you are. That's it's kind of show, but more to the point, the jelly bean, just like jelly baby gag, is great because he throws the bag of jelly babies onto the car. The guard has no clue what's going on, has zero situational awareness, follows a line of candies around a column, and then is shocked when the air car takes off. And the fact that this all happens on a soundstage about the size of my bedroom makes it even funnier because, like, there's absolutely no way this guy can't possibly see what's going on, and yet somehow he is so oblivious. And, like, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know how much of that is they had no time and no budget, and so they had to use what they had. How much of that is them of Douglas talking to the director saying, "No, just lean into it. Just it's funnier if you do that." I don't know how much of it's intentional or not, but either way, it's amazing because, like, it's just a ridiculous moment, and it's not even pretending that it's anything epic. It's just we're skirting around a column, jump into a car.
All right, since this is our first time, I think, seeing them, Eddy, what are jelly babies?
Oh yeah, good point.
Because it's not like he was handing them out on Scarro.
That's
hey,
true.
Javros, what a jelly baby!
See, that would have been so much better if Javros had just had jelly baby. This is really good. Maybe I won't make fascist despots. I'll just use this candy instead. Jelly babies are a kind of gelatin candy of various flavors. They're the best equivalent in America, I think, is gummy worms. It's the same kind of texture and flavor, except for they look like small babies. So you're actually eating small babies. And also, they're very similar to the Haribo bears. If you've ever had those candy, it's actually roughly similar size and shape. Except for I've actually had some Jelly Babies, and they're flat on the back, so like they're not completely three dimensional. So it's kind of like you can sit them down, which is plot relevant in an episode actually.
Did your friend Tom Baker send them to you when he signed the picture that you have of the Fourth Doctor?
Yes.
It's like, Eddy, my chum, here's some Jelly Babies to go along with this picture of me that I've signed for you, my best friend in the whole world, that Chris is going to give you stick about every time because he's super jealous of this side picture.
Yes, he actually mails them to me every month. I have a Jelly Baby of the Month club with Tom Baker.
Oh, you stole my joke before I got there.
But no, I mean, it just came down to Jelly Babies are just a very popular form of candy at the time. And what's really interesting is that if you watch the scene carefully, the bag of Jelly Babies throws in the carpet. There's actually a different sort of candy on the ground that he's following. It's kind of a circular candy, which I think are supposed to be all sorts, but I don't know for certain.
Then so I have the most important Doctor Who question for you to date out of all the episodes we've had.
Which is?
Are you ready?
I'm ready for it.
I see that you've steeled yourself to prepare for this question. I'm not at all going slow or drawing it out. I'm not at all lynching it. Jelly Baby or psychic paper? Both serve the similar purpose. Which would you prefer if you were the Doctor?
Honestly, psychic paper. I mean, I have a irrational attachment to Jelly Babies, but psychic paper just is more useful. And also, frankly, and I hate to say this, there have been better jokes written around the psychic paper than there have been around the Jelly Babies. There have been some great jokes, don't get me wrong, but most of them are in this cereal.
And we had a good joke in Star Beast around the psychic paper. Look at that.
Yeah, so. I love that. Catch up.
Any last comments on this amazing piece of cunning by the Doctor with candies?
No.
On the bridge, Fibili breaks the news to the captain about the damaged ship, and they can't repair it themselves. He suggests one more jump to find a material PJX1-8, which would do the same job. Romana is brought onto the bridge and slays everyone with some great banter. The captain tests her technology knowledge, and the nurse comes in, and before the captain can kill Romana, says, let's listen to her, because Romana mentions time travel, and they give her this massive piece of technology that she has to sort out. She looks at it, the captain menacing over her, waiting to kill her, and she explains to them that it must do something similar to the TARDIS, which is dematerialize and materialize somewhere else, saving her own life unknowingly through her own sheer brilliance. The Doctor manages to find his way up. The captain takes no chances as he has guns trained on them and forces them to lend technical assistance to the crew. Romana wonders why the tracer continuously gives off a signal, but the key to time is nowhere to be found. The Doctor realizes what's going on and is horrified. After they escape with Chemus and go underground, they find the ground beneath them is frozen and hollow. The Doctor explains that the planet Xanax has been hollowed out and fitted with engines to transmit it through space and material realms around other planets, such as Califrax, to plunder their wealth. The Doctor, Romana, and Chemus have no time to pause as the captain's guards emerge almost from nowhere in the tunnels, chasing behind them as they run for their own safety. A group of Mintiads appear in front of them saying, "We've come for the Doctor." Screen goes black. Cliffhanger. Is it?
So, just starting at the end real quick. I love the fact that after the, I still believe, intentionally rubbish cliffhanger at the end of episode 1, Douglas Adams literally does it again. It's like the Mentiads appear, and they're here for the doctor. They threaten the doctor. It's the exact same cliffhanger you used last time, Douglas.
Oh God.
But no, one of the things I think about this is we haven't talked much about this, but how obviously each doctor. One of the great innovations to show is that each doctor is simultaneously a very different character, the same character. And I always love when you see moments of other doctor performances inside of a doctor character.
Mm-hmm.
But in this one, I more of Romana. The two Romanas are very different in personality, but at moments when Romana is being dismissive of what she believes to be lesser cultures and is talking shit about their technology, they're so very much the same character, right? Like I see Lala Ward's character in Mary Tamer. Obviously, it's the reverse, but like in this moment of her just going, "Oh yeah, I can fix this in like 5 minutes with a stiff wind behind me because this is just rubbish." I love those moments because that's so Romana. Because the doctor even doesn't quite get that dismissive, and she's just looked at this is just why are we even having this fight? Because like this is just so tedious. I love it.
But then that also goes back, then that plays heavily though into the fact that she is new from Gallifrey
Yeah,
and is book smart, and that is what she's used to dealing with. The doctor, who's had centuries now of dealing with various cultures and their technology levels, has something that she hasn't quite learned yet, but is something that she will get to in her own adventures
right.
if we had them.
One thing that's clever that it's a little hard to point out, taking it bit by bit like this, is that we don't see the nurse at all in episode 1. She's not in episode 1. And she's kind of in the background in episode 2. She's referred to, she's doing some things in the background to the captain. So we see her on screen, but we don't see her as actually a meaningful character. And that's a very clever slow burn in this serial where there's a lot of fast stuff happening and it's just a whole bunch of bombastic nonsense at you. There's actually this slow burn plot happening in the background that slowly goes to the foreground in the next couple of episodes, and it's genuinely good pacing. It's streaming TV levels of pacing of people watching this and noticing this thing slowly coming to the foreground that you just don't see at this time frame. And it's so good.
And it would have been even better if it had stayed the master, because that is how the
Yeah.
master operates, like
Mm-hmm.
spot on. And you
Yeah.
get like that slow burn into like over the top mania that we're getting to.
Yes. Yes.
How
Otherwise,
do
I
you
don't have much.
like how do you like the discovery of the hollowed out planet when they actually get underground and you see they use a quarry, basically. How they use all of that to explain what's going on.
I mean, I generally liked it. It comes a bit. This is one of the few places where the pacing is a little weird, right? Because like, the doctor is insistent this is the wrong planet. That kind of falls away for the last half of episode 1, the first half of this episode, and then it kind of just comes back, and then the explanation is pretty quick on the heels. So that's one place where I could quibble with the pacing a little bit. And there's a fair bit of tell don't show because like they keep saying how cold it is and how freezing it is, frozen, but like nothing on the screen remotely indicates that it's actually cold. So like throw some snow on the ground or something. Just help me out here. But I mean, so that's a minor moment. But also, I'm looking at this from the perspective of some poor director going, I have to show a frozen planet inside of a hollow planet. Are you kidding me? Douglas, what the hell? So I very much chalk this up to we'll make it work, I guess.
All right. Part 3 of only 4, not 7, like the Daleks. The Mentiads are friendly and save them from the guards. The Mentiads now, including Prelix, create a force field with their psychic powers. The Mentiads have been a bane to the captain for some time, and Xanax has come to Califrax for its crystals. When refined, the crystals can be used to disrupt psychic abilities. Though the doctor doesn't know it yet, the captain is planning to materialize Xanax around Earth after mining on Califrax is finished, because the mineral PJX 1-8 has been located there. The Mentiads tell the doctor that Xanax was a prosperous planet until the reign of Queen Xanxia, who supposedly had mysterious powers. possibly a tissue decompressor. The galactic war she waged were the ruin of Xanax and its people. Pausing.
Yeah, I mean, we're slightly more info dumping here. But the
Yeah.
nice thing that's actually been happening, again, like this is actually structured really well, is that all of the stuff that seemed random, silly nonsense, we hit to episode 3, and it's like, oh, actually, there's a reason for all of this. And it's super dark, right? It's the, oh, haha, it's a pirate planet because there's a pirate guy and he's got a robot parrot and he yells at his friends and they're just going and stealing things. Like, no, there's a whole backstory happening here, and it's like suddenly you're now going into, okay, how did the captain get like this, and what happened to Queen Xanxia? And it's like, why am I really engaged in the backstory of this extremely silly episode? Because it just shows how amazing Douglas Adams is.
And so one of the things that was sort of glossed over from reading it that's very small in the scene but important is the captain is always full of bombast and takes a very Darth Vader-esque thing and says, like, when you fail me, one of you must die. And that's when you see the cyber parrot fly in the air and kill people. So you know it's deadly. So
Right.
we're establishing the deadliness of the cyber parrot. But more subtly is when there's no one around except for Philbilly and the captain. The captain's demeanor is vastly different, and he is
Yep.
constantly working on something, and he's talking to Philbilly like they're peers.
Mhm.
And so that shows you like the relationship those two have, and there's like definitely a friendship there. And so even though the captain is killing people left and right, Philbilly never gets killed, and you have the sense that he knows that he will not be killed in these, but he's acting along.
You bring up a really good point that I forgot about until you mentioned it. Was that, yeah, the bombast of the captain has steadily been going down through these 3 episodes, and Fibuli's arrogance has been steadily going up. And you're right, it's around that point where it's like, oh, something has shifted, but it was never a switch. It was something that slowly happened in
Mm-hmm.
the background. Suddenly, like, Fibuli's talking to the captain like, you got nothing on me, and it's like, on the one hand, you're surprised, but on the other hand, it's like, no, it actually has been naturally building to this point. So again, this is someone who really understands the pacing of television really, really well.
Yeah. And you don't know what the captain is working on, but he's
Mm-hmm.
constantly working on it. And you think it's probably related to like this planet device that he has. It's like jumping from place to place. It's not, which is, I love that because you assume, well, it's just part of that thing that he's doing. And it's something totally different. This is where the darkness comes in, where you find out that like it's destroying and killing all those people. And the psychics it's creating are from the energies from all the other planets. And it has been doing it for untold amount of time if the queen has lived that long.
Mm-hmm.
Which then it gets really fuzzy because the captain crashed here sometime more recently than that. So the timeline is really squishy here. So this is where it gets, oh, I got a deadline. I need to turn the script in.
Sure,
Hand
right.
wavy.
I mean, for all that we've espoused Douglas Adams' genius, intricacy of plot is not among them, right? He is very prone to, but this would be funny, or but this would be cool, and that's not necessarily a bad way. Clearly, it worked very well for him. But certainly, yeah, there's bits of it where it's like, for all of the command of the craft that he has, his command of deadlines is not among them. And so certainly, like, there's a bit of this, like, one more pass through section would have probably cleaned a few things up.
Yeah. And so the doctor does what the doctor does. He's rallied his allies to go and attack the enemy. The doctor and Chemus fail to steal an air car this time as a guard wises up and they're captured and taken to the bridge. The captain shows the doctor his trophy room of crushed remains of planets. The doctor's secret plan is to break into the engine room, but whilst he is looking for it, Chemus and he find a room with an older woman connected to a time damp used to slow down the flow of time, using the energy Xanax acquires to keep the queen barely alive. The doctor returns to the bridge and exposes the captain's nurse as a hologram under the control of the queen. The queen believes that she has made her hologram nearly real. The doctor tries but fails to convince her that the escalating energy needed of the time damp to keep her Regenerating will eventually cause her real body to die. The doctor is made to walk the plank, suspended over a sheer drop. He refuses to jump. The captain fires a gun at his feet until the doctor loses his balance and falls to his. And the captain laughs evilly. Cut to black.
So I want to start with the fact that the doctor literally pulls the same trick again, trying to steal an air car, and actually almost gets away with it. Like this is a perfect thing because, like, narratively, we know the guard's not going to fall for the same trick, and the fact that Douglas lets this thing go on for so long makes it so funny because, like, oh, I can do it, and then the gun comes off the screen, and just like, oh, it's such good comedic timing. But like, they literally recreate the whole scene beat by beat, and it's just like, what the fuck is happening? He can't possibly fall for this again, and then he doesn't. But it's still just like, oh, the fact that they just recycle that gag is perfect.
I want to point out that Kemis is giving me very, if they were useless, Jamie McCrimmon vibes throughout this entire serial. Like, because he's right there trying to help the doctor. He's like the muscle if the doctor needed muscle, but there is no muscle needed for this episode. So he's utterly useless, and it's just a body that the doctor has to explain things to. I'm getting failed, weak Jamie McCrimmon vibes off of him.
Well, that's interesting you say that because now that you bring that up, I'm quickly going through Kimmis's scenes. Is it to the point where you think it's almost poking fun at the need for a male role like Jamie or Ian? Or
Yes.
is it just you think it's an intentional kind of poke at this is a silly, outdated concept?
Simply because I think this is me extrapolating on what Douglas Adams may or may not have been considering, is that Harry with Tom Baker was a useless companion.
Oh, okay.
Like for the second Doctor and first Doctor, Jamie and Ian were essential parts of the show. And like they added in things, but Harry was I'll be generous and say less an effective companion for the Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And this would have happened, I think, a few years later, long enough for Douglas to have seen that and possibly added that in as like another gag in like this script just full of gags and pokes.
Well, now that you say that, I'm actually on board with you, although I think it's less Jamie, more Ian, because there are fair bits of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that we now know seem to have been heavily inspired by the first Doctor's run, particularly the serial The Chase, because like it has talking mice in it. It has some of the gags of appearing in a place, disappearing in the middle of it, because all that happened during the serial Chase. But for long years, we didn't have access to those episodes, so we didn't realize until like 20 years ago. I was like, oh, that's actually where Douglas Adams drew that stuff from. So I can see, yeah, with between the Harry run and the and his love of the first Doctor run, that yeah, it may have been an intentional kind of nod towards this male companion role is just outdated now. That's an interesting observation. That's very cool.
That is why this is also so much fun.
Right. So can we jump to the walking the plank scene?
What? But we got Minty ads.
We
approaching
do.
The bridge.
Okay, so I'm gonna be straight up honest. The Minty ads are the
nurse
weakest
queen.
part of this. The Minty ads are the least interesting part of this whole serial.
They could have totally been written out. I think they're added in so we would have 2 cliffhangers.
Yes.
It's like, shit, I don't have a cliffhanger. Psychics.
Yeah, it's like let's make goths who have discovered yellow. Okay, I guess. They're goths. Oh, hey, everything's so terrible. Oh, my life.
I'm not saying at least one of us on this podcast when they were in high school was a goth. So let's
both of us literally worked on Vampire the Masquerade. Come on.
All right, before we move on, because I think you want to move on, the scene where I pulled the quote from is in this episode, and it is fan-fucking-tastic. It shows the captain is definitely not a blowhard. He is like a genius and evil, but is working to some larger goal, and he has enough appreciation of the Doctor's own brilliance. We go back to this again, the same thing almost from Davros, where they're 2 men of science, and they go and they talk about the science.
Yep.
And he wants someone to appreciate his brilliance because he's not going to get it from anybody else. So that's...
It's the exact same trick, but it, again, works to good effect here, which is the evil scientists convinces and impresses the doctor with their intelligence, and then the evil scientist therefore thinks the scaffolds onto you didn't support my work, and the doctor being utterly horrified by it. It works both because in both cases it helps to elevate the villain. And in Genesis of Daleks, Davros didn't need it, so what ended up happening is Davros went from a really scary character to an iconic villain. In this case, what happens is the captain finishes his transformation from being a silly stereotype to there's a lot of layers going on this character that has been steadily building up. But this is the first time the doctor sees him, so the doctor takes him not at face value, but the doctor sees past the veneer immediately, which is great. But one thing I was going to say, because this does lead to the plank scene, is that we talked before, and you reiterated that Doctor Who sometimes really needs to hit people over the head with what's going on. And what's fascinating is that Douglas Adams is doing exactly that, but you don't realize it's happening. The Doctor reiterates 3 times in this scene how carefully the energies are balanced between all of these things. And then shortly after this, the Doctor spends a lot of time explaining how Clean Xanxia is a hologram. And it seems like it's just dialogue to fill the padding of those scenes, but in fact, both of those are extremely relevant plot points for the next episode. And I think it's a case where when you're watching it back to back, it feels a tiny bit heavy-handed, but if you realize there was a week between viewings, it's exactly the right amount of emphasis.
And additionally to that, for that scene, the captain gives you a crucial piece of information about his plan, is that every planet they take, it immediately recalibrates itself.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not working on this. This is already a set thing that functions perfectly. Mm-hmm. So then what is he doing all the time? Like that is,
Yeah, because what has happened is that Douglas Adams has trained us that these characters are one-dimensional, hilarious stereotypes, and then he starts just quietly sliding in information that pays off later on in the serial. So he's hiding things in plain sight by putting small details in amongst the ludicrous details. For those of you who are Patreon backers, and if you're not, you should be. We talked about this on Knives Out. This is something that Knives Out does really well, and it's the same. It's the exact same tactic, but it's still done really well, even 50 years earlier. Of hide the small details amongst the really big details, and then pretend like the small details didn't happen, and just convince you they never happened when they absolutely did. And that's kind of what's happening here on a slightly smaller scale. Of like the captain flat out tells us what's going on in a very small way, and then the doctor kind of steamrolls over that because he's correctly going to, but that's horrific, and then we get stuck into the horrific nature of the crime, and so we forget about that moment until it comes up later. So,
all right, before we move on, is there anything else you would like to say about the bridge? My only comment about the plank, is that even the doctor literally looks at him and says, "A plank?"
Like, yes.
Any last comments? Because I know that you were waiting for the plank scene.
Well, but that's the reason I want to bring it up is like this is the reason why I'm convinced that Douglas Adams intentionally knows that the cliffhangers are rubbish, because the first one is the doctor going, "Okay, I should probably fall down here now." The second one is just to make the idea of showing up is supposed to be a cliffhanger, and it's like we're not even going to bother with that. Now the doctor has recognized that, okay, really, this is the cliffhanger. It's just a slight pinch of meta awareness because the doctor realizes you're a pirate. Of course, there's a plank here, but he's even then it's like, what? Really? This is your plan? I'm just gonna walk off and fall really high? That's the best you got.
You know what? I think Douglas Adams was prescient.
In what way? I mean,
how did Tom Baker die? How did Tom Baker die? Fell from a big height. How did Douglas know?
That's actually fantastic. I love that.
All right, synopsis for episode 4. I'm just going to read the whole thing so you don't have to worry about a break in the middle. The Doctor somehow surviving the fall because it was only a projection of him that walked the plank. He has figured out the final piece of the Queen's puzzle, the device he found in the room with the body. Xantia has been using the device to create an image of herself disguised as the captain's nurse. She is almost immortal because of the power of Xanax, which she uses to make her form permanent. Dementi has approached the bridge. Dun dun dun. They expect the Doctor to have taken control of the engine room by now, but because of the psychic interference transmitter, they are powerless. Romana and Mula have to take up arms to protect the group of men because no Mindiad can be a man, because even out the course of the episode, they say when a man gains psychic powers, the captain seals the bridge as Xanax prepares to make a jump to Earth. Since Xanax engines were damaged when the planet materialized in the same place as the TARDIS, Romana conceives a plan to employ the same trick to prevent Xanax from materializing. While the Mintiads do their best to sabotage Xanax's engines, because K9 has been repowered and is creating an anti-field to interfere with the psychic interference transmission field, the Doctor, Romana, and the Mintiads managed to let me rephrase that because I'm going to go off notes now because I want to point out something in 1 minute. Before I do, though, the Mintiads are trying to interfere with Xanax's engines. They have a mental connection with the Doctor, who has him throw a literal spanner into the works. Xanax kills Xanax. Sorry, that is just still a literal spanner in the fucking works. You've got psychics with great mental powers and a spanner. Mr. Philbley dies. The captain is enraged and saddened and finally tries to strike to kill the Queen, who manages to kill the captain. The Doctor, Romana, and the Mintiads destroy Xanax's bridge and the Queen, ending the devastation caused by Xanax's travels. In the aftermath, the Doctor and Romana collect the second segment key of time from space as it's just floating out there and scoop it up. And they set off in the TARDIS for more adventures in search of the next segment. A spanner in the works.
So you started off by saying you felt like this is a modern one, and I question you on that. But now that we walk through it, I'm completely convinced you're right, because that is exactly the kind of Russell T Davies move, right?
Yep. Yep.
But so I love this episode because, like I said before, it's both well executed and also utter complete rubbish, and it's great. Like, on the one hand, the various arcs of Fibuli, the nurse, and the captain have all completely exchanged now, right? They're all in completely different places than they were from episode 1, and they've been natural, careful growth or decline, depending on your point of view, for each of them, and they all reach their natural, well-earned conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
And even the Doctor's complete bullshit outing of the cliffhanger was telegraphed, right? He mentioned the holograms before, and now he has the hologram, and so he has the hologram. He's going to show you 3 or 4 times. By the way, did you catch it's a hologram? Hey, by the way, it's a hologram. It's a hologram because I'm really clever because I'm a hologram. And then the episode goes on to explain the actual plan, and it makes no fucking sense, and I don't care. She is trying to gain power to make her hologram permanent.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
It's so she can regenerate, Eddie.
Right, like the more you say the stuff about the master, the more like that would actually make this more sense. If this was the I'm using energy to get my next regeneration cycle, everything would have fell into place.
Because at this point in time, the master was at Shriveled Husk on Gallifrey.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This would have definitely made we wouldn't have got Anthony as the master, and Nissa's family would have been okay, and Traken would still be there.
So you're saying Douglas Adams is the reason why Traken is dead?
Yes, I blame the destruction of Traken not on Douglas Adams because he tried to save it, on the people that didn't let his original script happen.
Oh my god.
Douglas Adams, aka failed savior of Traken. Done.
But I mean, again, like there's great moments. Like a throwaway line from Romana episode 1 is the entire crux of the climax for this episode.
It's really well written. There are problems with it, but there's problems in everything.
Sure.
And it went through multiple script iterations from like to be cut down to be made for TV. And there's no telling what changes had to be made on the fly to stay within budget.
Mm-hmm.
It is still an incredible piece.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because like you can see glimpses of the epic scope of it. Like, I genuinely would be curious to see if like someone could take the original. I mean, you can't redo it, but like if the original script had written for like a Rusty Davies era thing, and all the epicness could have been shown, what it would look like. But even then, like to have the next segment of the Key of Time be an entire planet is just huge epic scope.
Yeah.
This thing is a hollowed husk of a planet that materializes on other planets and mines it for their gems. Is just insane. But you also don't need to show that. You can just tell people, this is what's happening, and here's a small polystyrene ball hanging in a glass cage to show you how amazingly epic this is. But it still works. It's still completely plausible and believable.
And then it goes into the fact, though, that it offsets that they originally, Douglas Adams hadn't intended the Key to Time to be a big deal at all. It's supposed to be found immediately. This still solves that same problem because they never discover the Key to Time in the episode. It's like a couple lines put in to let it know, oh, this is the Key to Time.
Yep.
So fixed.
Right, yeah. Literally, it's just, oh, by the way, touch this thing with the wand. Boop, there we go.
And this is captured off screen. So
yeah.
Like a great team of people working together to make something that works and is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
The ending, the very, very end, with the slow push of the explosive device, I could live without.
It's because, I mean, yes, the ending is, again, it's complete rubbish. But the fact is that in the course of 4 25-minute episodes, to see the captain holding Mr. Fibuli when he dies is genuinely heartbreaking. Right? So it's like, the plot doesn't even matter anymore. It's always been about these 3 characters. And the fact that Douglas Adams makes you genuinely care about a guy, I want to reiterate, who had a cybernetic implant for his mustache that was damaged in a crash is impressive. Oh, and also there's a fight between K9 and the robot parrot, and it's just garbage.
What? That was epic. K9 shooting blasters, the parrot dropping energy
for 5 minutes.
And the Doctor and Chemus making it look deadly as they avoid the drawn-in pieces of artwork.
Where the lasers are clearly coming at like almost a 90-degree angle from the place they're supposed to be shooting from.
High tier.
Again, you see where the script is straining, because on paper it's like, yeah, the robot parrot and the robot dog fight, that would be hilarious and awesome, and it's like, yeah, we can't do any of that.
I will let you know that my dog perked up every time that parrot made a noise, which it didn't do for the rest of the episode. So my dog was engaged. My dog was engaged in the fight between K9 and the cyborg parrot.
Well, there you go.
It wasn't made for us. It was made for our animal friend viewers. I'm ashamed that you didn't let your dog come in the room to watch that, Eddie. Podcast over.
I mean, the gag of K9 having the bird in his mouth is almost worth it. But even then, like, you can see the production crew going, but he doesn't have a mouth. I guess stick it on the laser. Sure, whatever. We have to get this filmed.
Any final thoughts about the Pirate Planet, or as it was originally titled, The Pirate and the Perfect Planet?
It's almost unfair to talk about this because, like, again, you have one of the more iconic TARDIS teams, some amazing actors with one of the best writers of the 20th century working on it. You're going to have good, and like a lot of the other Key to Time episodes are just not as pure fun as Pirate Planet. But I think I'm glad you chose it because I think it is a good encapsulation for the best parts of the second half of Baker's run, right? Like when I think of what I love about the Graham Williams era of Tom Baker, inevitably my thought I'm either thinking of the Pirate Planet or I'm thinking of something like the Pirate Planet. I mean, City of Death, which is the other Douglas Adams one. So it's like I'm thinking of one of those two probably, because it is the perfect balance of existential horror and amazingly physical and verbal comedy that is just something that Doctor Who is one of the very few shows that can pull that off.
Absolutely. And I've already said my piece about it because that's why I chose it. It is the pinnacle and the sweet spot of Doctor Who being incredibly sci-fi, poignant, and touching on multiple genres at once to pull off something that is inconceivable and still addictively watchable today, nearly 50 years later. That
Mm-hmm.
is exceptional.
Yeah.
And I'm going to round out our game here. So, Eddie, I get to choose companions first from the Fourth Doctor because you got to choose first last time.
Okay. Gee, I wonder who you're going to pick.
So Harry is not on my list. I choose Romana. Romana, motherfucker. I will always choose Romana.
Have I chosen for the Fourth Doctor yet? No, wait.
No, we wait because we need to get all the companions before we choose.
So I can get Sarah Jane.
Yes, you can.
Excellent. All right, there you go.
Sarah Jane was my backup if you got to chose first.
Right.
But all right. So who's your TARDIS team? And then there'll be more to this game.
I'm trying to remember now. So I had Barbara. I got. Did I get Jamie? I got Jamie.
I got Jamie.
You got Jamie.
Because remember, the first Doctor episode was a little weird because we only did one, so we had to both choose from that one, and you chose first.
Right,
I chose first for the second Doctor, and then you chose for the third.
Right. So then I chose Vicky. Then no,
you don't
Zoe.
Remember your own
Zoe.
team?
No, Zoe. It's right. No, it was Barbara. It was Zoe. Then it was Joe, and then now I have Sarah Jane.
All right. My team, if memory serves, is I got a really Time Lord heavy team. Susan.
Mm-hmm.
I think I got the Brig. Sorry, I got.
You got
Susan, Jamie, Brig, and Romana.
Right.
Like that is a fucking awesome team. I want to see that. Doctor Who people, reach out to me. I will write those novels for you. All right, Eddie.
Even
the reason
both actors are dead.
I said novels. I didn't say TV.
Oh, fair enough.
Because I think I'd be a better novel writer than I would a TV writer because I would pull the fucking Douglas Adams and like, this is my idea.
Right.
Like, motherfucker, we cannot afford that even on a Disney Plus budget. Go back.
Like, if it was across the Disney budget, that's impressive.
All right. Now that you've got your TARDIS team, what type of adventures would you go on and who would be your major adversary for your serial arc of 13 episodes?
Honestly, it would probably be a fairly traditional run of like bouncing between sci-fi concepts and historical exploration. So I think that team works really well with both of those. And I think it would be the antagonist would be the Master, but very specifically the Third Doctor era Master. So it would be he would be at the end of just about every episode. He would be in disguise, increasingly implausible pseudonyms, and Joe immediately realizing it's the Master every time.
Awesome.
How about you?
Mine would, with my team, would of course be very sci-fi action-oriented stuff, and we would have bump into a few of the classic enemies like the Cybermen and the Centaurans, but the primary antagonist would be, I've already told you at the start of the episode, the Great Vampire.
Yeah.
Because the team is like a brilliant science action team and fighting the vampires who are like super powerful sciencey people. Perfect.
Yeah, I could see your team like eventually making their way back to the Dark Times and the vampires trying to rewrite history so that they win the Dark Times.
Yeah, like that would be my story with my team.
That'll be awesome.
All right. The reason, I'm sorry, you have a quote before I.
Yes. My quote. One of my favorite. To be fair, there's a lot of great Tom Baker quotes, but one of my favorites is, "There's no point being grown up if you can't be childish sometimes."
I almost chose that last episode.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Because it's one of the reasons that I ended the game earlier is because what are we doing next, Eddy? Are we hitting Peter Davison? Do you have to tell us about Jonathan Turner yet?
No, I'm putting that off for a couple more months. Well, at least one more month. Because one thing we learned from our superhero run is if we just keep going and going and going, we are prone to burnout, and we don't want to burn out in Doctor Who. We love this too much. So what we're going to start doing, we're going to pull a line from earlier in the year when we took a digression to do The Prisoner and David Lynch. We're going to do the same thing here. So we're going to take a short break, mid-season here. And we're going to do something we're calling criminals doing good. That's our kind of subgenre. And this is people who shows about people who are on the wrong side of the law but are doing the right thing. So we're going to start with Burn Notice, which is about a spy who is no longer a spy and tries to make a life for himself. So we're going to watch episode 1, pilot, season 1. Season 1, episode 7, Broken Rules. And then season 2, episode 13, Bad Breaks.
Awesome. If people are looking to purchase some of your sweet swag of stuff you've created, stuff that you really think is awesome that will still give you money for doing, or if they just want to send you money, how would they do so?
If you want to send me money, I can hook you up with my Ko-Fi. But if you want to buy my stuff, the stuff that gets me a cut, the best one is my creator-owned stuff, which you can find at realmsofpugmire.com. If you're into dogs and cats and having them going on amazing fantasy adventures, that is definitely the best place to go. But if you want to check any of my work out, you can find that all at pugsteady.com. Or you could find me on the Darker Hue Discord, where currently I am still complaining about the Daleks, although I have seen the colorized version of the Daleks, and it actually is a lot better. How about you?
If you're looking to support me, you can go to the Darker Studios website and buy anything from there. I have a Ko-fi, I think, somewhere in existence if you want to give money to that. But the best place is going to be something that you haven't heard of. That's going to be my Patreon, where I only charge you for when I actually post something, and I post 1 to 3 times a month with what I think is great material. And if I don't think it's cool enough, I don't post it. Otherwise, I guess that's it for this episode, and we'll come back to you next time with Burn Notice, starring the impeccable, only character that matters in the whole show, I believe, Bruce Campbell.
Absolutely. So see you next week, where we burn some spies.